definition of a common denominator: a feature shared by all members of a group. In people, this means if you see everybody as having a certain trait, you are probably the one with that trait. You're the feature shared by all members of a group. In other words, if everyone's a dick, you're the dick. This may come across as inflammatory, and depending on the mood you're in when you're watching this, you may now think that I'm the dick. But if you'll hang with me for just a few minutes, I'll explain how this concept applies to those instances where the world is out to get you and what you can do to fix everybody. Alternatively, if you know somebody who's a common denominator, perhaps you'll find something useful to pass along to aid in their attempts to stop the world from coming at them. Before you think I'm pointing fingers, I urge you to watch to the end and get to the part where I use myself as the ultimate common denominator example. Also, I introduce a 3-part formula for helping someone realize they're the common denominator and how to help them out of it. As always, there's a principle at the end to sum it up. First, let's start with a universal truth. The world is not out to get you. It's too damn busy with its own problems to bother with a single human and their tiny problems. Yes, tiny. Infinitesimal, depending on how far outside of yourself you're willing to look. How are your problems compared to that of your whole family, community, city, country, continent, planet, galaxy? Have you ever been driving along and looked at another driver and thought to yourself, that's a person, a whole separate life from mine with their own complete set of problems, and then looked around at the hundreds of other cars on the road with a counter in your head, suddenly running incalculable multipliers of that thought? Well, you should. Some call it perspective, and it's healthy to get out of your own head once in a while, at the very least. At the time of this recording, there are over 8 billion people on this planet with well over 8 billion sets of problems. Orders of magnitude more if each person has at least 99. They have challenges that you know nothing about while they know nothing of yours. With small adjustments made for being born in certain times and places, we're all in the same or similar boat of an average lifespan on this globe, hurtling through space with our one shot of being productive while we're here. You're going to be at a constant disadvantage if, when looking around, all you see are haters and people trying to stop you. However, holding yourself accountable instead allows you to gain something out of the negativity, the challenges you face, and the adversity you must overcome. Ever encountered a person that has been fired many times? Either their bosses were all jerks, or the job sucked anyway and nobody knows talent when they see it. Or perhaps they're the jerk. They were devoid of any discernible talent during that time period, or maybe it simply wasn't a job fit, several times in a row. I've been on both sides of this equation. As a leader, with my particular views on accountability, I usually err on the side of trying to identify the talent for as long as possible before I'm willing to allow somebody to just fall on their face. The real challenge with common denominators is that they don't often know that that's what they are, and it's incredibly difficult to get them to see it. The aforementioned job hopper truly thinks that they either have horrible luck or that there just isn't a good boss at a good job who will appreciate what they bring to the table. And good luck convincing them otherwise. If you'd like to try, I have found a redenominating formula that has a solid chance to work. You will need credibility plus quality questions plus conviction. Let me break those down. Number 1, credibility. Credibility is a combination of relevant experience, knowledge, and the other person's belief that you are a resource on the subject. For more information on credibility, read Principles by Ray Dalio. You can't convince a job hopper that they have a poor attitude about work if you struggle to hold down a job yourself. I'm the youngest of a handful of brothers, and I had zero credibility until sometime in my late 30s after I'd had decades of my own experiences to borrow from. It doesn't always require so much time, but you might need to make up for lack of experience by having specialized knowledge. Maybe having a degree in socioeconomics or an MBA might help convince your friend you know what you're talking about regarding the job market. Number 2, quality questions. Quality questions are questions that allow for exploration. They tend not to be leading, though if they are gentle leaders that have vague goals presented rather than sharp yes or no alternatives. I've mentioned before that well-crafted questions coming from a place of caring are extremely helpful to help somebody self-discover. For the hopper, an example might be, what do you think your previous employers would say about the situations that led them to fire you? If they weren't jerks, what do you think they saw in you? Number 3, conviction. Conviction is not something I recommend often, but in this circumstance, it holds value. It should be a combination of feeling confident about your knowledge and your intent to help this person overcome the obstacles they're building for themselves. If you don't really care whether or not they listen, why bother advising? You need to be willing to share your knowledge and allow for them to make up their own mind. That shows understanding of our human experience. Conviction, in this case, is confidence and caring. I have been the dick before. Quite frankly, I still am sometimes. As a matter of fact, the single most pivotal moment of my development was being fortunate enough to realize at some point that all of my friends were systematically walking away from me. For a brief window, I got angry at them and was in the process of deciding that they were all turning into dicks when I realized I was the common denominator. I was the only one of them without a car, a job, or a generous bone in my body. My social life survived solely upon their willingness to drive me around and even pay for things. I wasn't grateful, at least not demonstrably, and at some point it even became my apparent expectation. As though my presence were so valuable to them that it made perfect sense they would keep putting themselves out for my pleasure. It should have been no surprise whatsoever when they began to forget to invite me to things or not return my calls. Or pages back then. Millennials. Ask your parents what pagers were. Be prepared to laugh your balls off if they remember some terms of pager code. To this day, I'm grateful that it didn't take me longer to realize I was the problem. Once I started reflecting, I quickly realized there was more to it. I was also an angry person. I ranted a lot. I had firm opinions about everybody and everything, and they were rarely kind. I prided myself on the ability to argue, and often did so for the sheer pleasure arguing brought me. I was sarcastic and fancied myself a quick wit. I'm certain I thought I was funnier than I was in reality. I was unabashed about my judgment of others and rarely held back about them in mixed company. Maybe they would have been willing to keep driving me around and paying for the occasional movie if I wasn't so unashamedly angry at everything and vocal about it. I'm glad I don't know the answer to that musing. This realization started me on a path of self-development that eventually turned into a skill that I now utilize to help others become better versions of themselves. It taught me the value of helping others, how good it feels to guide someone toward getting what they want out of life, and it gave me a karmic ledger to balance. At some point, I became homeless, quite literally living off the generosity of others, sleeping on living room floors until they asked me to move on and crash on somebody else's floor. I promised myself that one day I would balance that karmic debt by owning a house and would always have an extra room and a bed to pay the universe back for these people that took pity on me at my low point. I'm extraordinarily thankful to have been able to do exactly that for some folks in my life that have needed a place to crash. They have stayed in my home and have been as comfortable as I could make them while they resolved whatever was needed during the time period. All because at some point, I looked around and realized that being a non-contributing, ungrateful, angry person caused me to not deserve to have any friends. I could have stayed angry at them, blamed them for what I perceived then to be selfish acts, and tried to muddle through life with a poor attitude. I don't really care to imagine what might have become of me had I stayed a dour little troll. That was what one of them called me during that time period. I've cherished it ever since. Instead, I relished the stroke of luck and stumbling onto the discovery that I was the problem. The good news about being the common denominator is that it's a choice. And once you realize you have it, you can make a more productive one. When you know someone who's a common denominator, that's exponentially tougher. Like a family member that most of the family doesn't care to be around and nobody's telling them. These are veritable minefields because most likely the people who meet the criteria for the redenominating formula are the ones who should be responsible, and yet either can't bring themselves to do it or don't realize what's happening, maybe even refuse to see it. Since everyone else may not have the whole formula, this situation is usually fraught and often goes unresolved. Even meeting all three criteria doesn't stop people from wanting to avoid making the person feel bad. My view is that this only enables the situation to continue, and your only hope is that the person eventually gets lucky like I did, and then does something about it like I did, or else they will be victimized by the world at large for the rest of their lives, driving the wedge between themselves and their loved ones wider and wider. When possible, we should strive to hold ourselves accountable and realize that to not develop others when we have the means to is selfish. The principle. Work on being self and socially aware. Recognize when you might be the very thing you're accusing most others of being. Offer help to those who may not see that they're in the situation if you can. In this video, I mentioned accountability and how valuable it can be. If you haven't seen it yet, check out Take Accountability and Be the Best You for a closer look at how this can benefit you. Thanks for watching the video and be sure to subscribe for more like it. Click on the notification bell to be alerted to new videos.